Hello, welcome to the True Paranormal. I believe I'm live now. Sorry I didn't do a live stream last week. I did on TikTok on the Thursday. I didn't on Facebook because I just didn't have the time with being on holiday. So today I'm going to be discussing my Beardo Live Fake versus Real Part 5 article. And I'm going to try and be quick about it, even though at the moment I'm quite slow, just because with having a week off from doing this typical live stream, it's, trying to get back into it. So, and it's been a while as well since I have last looked at this article, so bear with me for this. I'm going to try and be quick because I would like to watch some football later on, which is why I'm streaming on Facebook a little earlier at, what time is it, 6:45, instead of the usual 8 o'clock time, because that is when kickoff is. So, the article started out with this segment of the Beardo livestream, and by the way, this is the last time I'll be documenting this particular livestream from Beardo. It was 5 articles in total. If you want to go and read them, please do on the trueparanormal.blogspot.com. Otherwise, you can go to YouTube and find it within Beardo's live streams, and you can watch the full thing there. Or I do have the live stream linked in the at the end of articles. And yeah, so this is the final part, which started from about 2 hours 20 minutes in and went up till about the 3 hour mark. So this is the last 40 minutes or so of the live stream. And as I said, I wanted to document the live stream because it would just get lost within YouTube videos. It would get lost within Beardo's lives because he goes live 2 or 3 times a week. So it's very easy to get buried. So the only way you discover it is if YouTube recommends it to you. And I don't think YouTube recommends 3 hour live streams to people. So I wanted to immortalize it in a way where people could find it and discover the conversations that occurred. Because there were some good discussions that happened within the live stream. And this Friday, I will be publishing an article which is to do with the live stream. It's not, like I say, it's not documenting the live stream. It is about the reaction from people. So I noticed after Beardo's live stream, there were 3 particular groups, 2 of which were direct responses to Beardo's live. One was, I believe it was a response. They don't mention it in their post though, so officially it's not a direct response, but it hit a lot of the same points that Beardo's live stream hit, and it was published shortly after. It was a few days, maybe a week after Beardo's live. So in the time scale of things, I looked at that and I was like, that seems like they've seen the live stream or they've seen something to do with the live stream, and then they've given a response but not acknowledged the live stream. So I will document all of that in this Friday's article, as well as a little bit of discussion along with a bit of discussion about points that they raise and that were raised in Beardo's live, etc. And that will be it. I don't have to write about it ever again, which I enjoyed the live, but it's 3 hours long. It's been 5 articles, 6 if you include the reaction. It's a lot of time and effort that I've put into it, into documenting it. So I will be quite glad to see the back of it. But it's been fun, and like I say, it's good to document these things. Anyway, so this segment of the live stream, because I went on a bit of a tangent, I need to not do that because again I'm being time conscious. A comment from Rick Dersh was read out, and this comment read, what would you consider your irrefutable proof of paranormal evidence? And Beardo said that he's had his irrefutable proof, that being a guy stood at the side of his bed. His uncle had the same experience several years later, and it was the same guy that they both saw. They didn't know who it was, and it turned out that when a photo album was opened years and years later, when they were both adults, they both said that the guy in the album was the guy that they saw at the side of the bed. And it turned out that that guy was the great-grandfather, and they hadn't been shown that photo before, and that was the only photo of him. And that experience was enough proof for Beardo that the paranormal is real and that he'd seen a ghost. And he didn't know it was a ghost at the time. He was 6 years old, or maybe younger, and he thought that it was just a guy that was in the room, which I think that that's all incredibly interesting, because of the vividness of the spirit, I think is the most interesting. I was just trying to think about what's the most interesting part of it to me, because obviously you've got details like it's the only photo and they'd never seen it before, because straight away you might be thinking, oh, I can debunk it because you'll have seen a photo somewhere in the house, therefore your brain will have registered it, and then you will have hallucinated it possibly, and you've both just hallucinated the same guy in the same room, and that's what it is. But the fact they hadn't seen the photo before and they didn't know who it was, and that there's only one photo that exists of him, it's an interesting point. But the bit I find particularly interesting is how vivid the person was. So the fact that they thought that he was there was just a random guy in their room, and that they were that vivid, because that's how I think apparitions will be. I don't particularly believe in the whole you'll see disembodied legs walking around a room or whatever, or a floating head, or I don't think it's anything like that. I don't think that a ghost will be particularly translucent, or transparent or anything like that. I think that you'll get all or nothing with it. Now, granted, there will be some sort of stage in between, I'd assume, but I don't know, because it's that thing of trying to imagine it, and no one, as far as I'm aware, unless they say it's faded in and out or walked through a wall, something like that, has said a ghost has just spontaneously appeared in front of them. So it begs to question, what is the process for a ghost appearing? What is that process for an apparition? Because I know years ago, like most haunted were saying it's orbs, and that orbs are the first stage to a manifestation. I disagree. I think a lot of orbs are just dust and bugs and whatnot. I think you can have light anomalies like that captured on camera, but I don't think that's the first stage for an apparition, because that implies you'd have one orb and then you'd get another orb and another one, and it'll just huge cluster to form a huge thing, and I don't think that will be the process. But I know through researching various locations and from speaking to people that I know who have questioned whether or not they've interacted with spirits, there's a common thread of these stories where someone thinks that they've seen a normal person, albeit they've thought, oh, a bit odd how they're dressed, and then later on, after a particular event, they then question if that person was ever there at all, and that if they were a ghost. Places that come to mind, so you've got Alton Towers. There's a story about, I think he might have been a gardener, but he saw someone in medieval dress, kind of possibly dressed as a knight, I'm not sure, but I think it was medieval area, walking around the gardens. And he thought, oh, there's just an actor walking around the gardens, dressed in that way. But whenever he mentioned it to anyone, the responses were, oh no, we don't know who that is. And sometimes he'd see the guy, sometimes he wouldn't, so he never approached him, but he was left wondering, is it a ghost, is it a person, what's going on with that? And I've got a friend who was approached, I believe it was a bus stop or a tram stop, but they were there, it was raining at the time, they were approached by two people that looked like they were dressed from a Victorian era. They said something to them, possibly along the lines of get home safe, and my friend kind of looked away, looked back, and they were gone. And they were like, oh, were they actually there at all? Were they ghosts, you know? Because it was just a straight thing, there's nowhere for him to have hidden or anything like that. So there was like, they wouldn't have been able to get away that fast for them to not see them. But again, they were left questioning it. There's also, I believe, there's a castle somewhere, which I've written about, where there was a woman, like they had a room for treasure, etc. And the person guarding it, outside the room, heard a woman inside, and he went inside, and then she asked him for some water. He left, went back, got her some water, went back to her, and she was just gone, and there was no record of that woman at all. And so you have these stories where people have encountered people who, at the time, they're like, oh, this is a real person, but then later on, it's left in question as to, hang on a minute, was that person actually there? Have I imagined something? Were they a ghost? So the fact that Beardo has said that he's had that kind of experience, I think, is very interesting to me, because it's another one in this list of stories where someone has reported seeing a ghost, but it's not the stereotypical transparent figure, or walking through walls, that kind of thing. It's instead that they are solid, and they seem like a person, which is very interesting. Now, Kev responds to Beardo by saying that he can debunk Beardo's experience through using psychology and false memories. And I do agree with Kev. I do think that you can debunk it. Now, this is why I say the interesting thing is that there was only one photo and that they had never seen that photo before. But with false memories, Beardo was 6 at the time. He could have dreamt it. They could have discussed it and, influenced one another's memories, so they think that it was the same person they saw, but really it was someone with similar details. With myself, I don't remember faces. Everyone in my memory is just kind of the same. So yeah, they could very well, one of them could have opened and be like, oh my god, that was the guy outside of the bed, and the other person would then look at it, misremember it, and they'd be like, oh yeah, that's true. And so Kev says irrefutable evidence. Like, he doesn't debunk it, unfortunately. He doesn't say how psychology and false memories come into play. But he does go on to say that irrefutable evidence is an excessive level of data in a small situation, as you don't know what it is that you're measuring, and so you have to measure everything: atmospheric, visual, temperature, humidity, and radiation, to see what changes at the same time as another thing across multiple different data sets to be able to say it's irrefutable proof. And he's found that after 15 years, you have to enjoy what you like, and you don't, but as long as you don't feed more nonsense into an already bogged up system. And so you try and learn, you try and do what you like, and personal experience is all you'll get. You'll never get irrefutable evidence of the paranormal on something that is repeatable. Something about the human personal experience, it's required through trauma, psychological effect in the environment, or the environment has an effect on us. Just part of the human experience. Will not find irrefutable proof. Evidence for Beardo isn't evidence enough for him, just as his won't be evidence for someone else. And it's a redundant question, as there are multiple answers to one question every time. He kind of goes over the same point a few times in that. But I kind of agree and kind of disagree with some things. I think that you can get irrefutable proof. I think you probably can get something that's repeatable. But it's one of those where when I think of spirits, I think of people, and I think of, it's like observing a human being, right? When someone's going to psychological examination, you kind of leave them in a room, you see how they behave, whatever, that kind of stereotypical view of it. That's kind of like what paranormal investigation is. You're in a room and you're tweaking various variables. You say, look, here's a trigger object, use this. Oh, there's an app, interact with this. Oh, there's a cat ball over there, push that, make it light up. You're doing things like that, and you're hoping to get the same response. But at the end of the day, if you're thinking in terms of people, just because someone has moved a trigger object once does not mean that they will move the same trigger object again, or at least on command. People can be random yet predictable in nature. It's one of those where if you ask someone to do something, they may do it, they may not do it. It is their own choice. Spirits, I think, are the same. So unless you have a spirit who really knows what they're doing regarding when they can move things, how they can move things, and if they're super cooperative with you. So let's assume Ed and Lorraine Warren were legitimate for a moment. If you find the spirits of Ed and Lorraine Warren, or Harry Houdini, he's another one who wanted to try and prove the paranormal. If you found their spirit and they knew what they were doing, you could probably get repeatable results from them, because they know what you're trying to do, and they'll know the methods you're trying to use, and as a result, you should get repeatability, because the spirit is straight away on side with your aims, and that's what you need to try and find. Because if you go to a random abandoned location where it's just someone who's just died somehow, I don't know, but just a random spirit there, they aren't necessarily going to be on side with what you're trying to do. They're not necessarily going to understand what you're trying to do. if you want someone who will understand, you need someone probably more modern. So already you're trying to find a spirit from the 1900s, probably late 1900s, to try and, you need spiritualism movement onwards. And so you're not going to find that in old castles, and probably not going to find it in abandoned locations. And so you're trying to find kind of this holy grail spirit who is on side with you and can move things on demand. Because I don't think that they necessarily can. I think that if they want to, they might not be able to, because it will depend on the energy that they have. So you might get repeatability a little bit, but then it will stop, and you won't get it for a long time. And straight away, a lot of people then might give up on the location, be like, oh, the repeatability was a fluke, let's move on. So that's why I'm just like, I think on one hand you can get repeatability, but on the other hand it's tricky, because you're dealing with essentially human beings who might want to do what you say, might not want to do what you say, depends on their aims. And using Harry Houdini as an example again, he died, the 1920s maybe? I don't know, early 1900s. At least I believe it was early 1900s. At the time, he wanted to very much so see if he could prove the paranormal. So if there is an afterlife, and if he is in there and he's like, oh, look, paranormal, it exists, his aims may have changed. He may since no longer care about trying to help out in investigating and improving it. So even if you do find that spirit who potentially has an interest in trying to help a living person prove it, that interest may be long gone by the time you find them and interact with them, which is an interesting thing to consider. And I think that's an angle that people don't often discuss. They don't tend to discuss spirits like they are living conscious beings. Because like I said, I would just think of them as invisible humans. That's the easiest way, I think, of looking at it. It's a simple way, but I think it could be correct, and it would explain why people sometimes get results, sometimes don't get results, because it's that finicky nature of human beings. And everyone's different. Everyone responds to different things differently. So that's the tricky part of investigation. You need to try and find not what works, but what works for that spirit. And even then, you go to somewhere, the spirit might be there, it might not be there. You might get a different spirit. You don't know because they're invisible. So it's tough to judge. So, as I say, and I agree with what Kev said about you don't want to try and fog up an already, put more nonsense into an already fogged up system. So as long as you're honest and you're trying to do things honestly and trying to do things you genuinely believe might help and benefit the paranormal community, you're good. You're good to do that. And he was right as well that evidence for someone is not evidence for someone else. A good example is on Facebook. I saw a video that someone had filmed of a water bottle that was lying on its side and it was rocking. The person said there was no breeze, there was no draft or anything like that, no vents, that were making it rock. No, you had people commenting saying, oh, that's just, you've started it moving and the water inside is keeping it going. But this footage, it showed it moving, and then they zoom in on it. And I looked at it and I was like, that's an interesting video. And I commented saying that it's interesting, but you shouldn't have zoomed in, you should have zoomed out. Because we could see already that it was moving and how much it was moving. But what we couldn't see is if there was someone off to the side, out of shot, wafting some paper or something at it to make it rock. Because obviously you can't see draft. So even though you say it's a draft, we don't know that. And this is something that I learned kind of from Kieran O'Keefe in Most Haunted. I remember he always used to say, if there's an orb or something like that, if it appears off camera, like if it goes from off camera, like my hand here, if it kind of goes across like this, and then it keeps going, and then just keeps going off camera, that's not good footage. You want it to appear on camera and disappear on camera. You want to try and capture the full room, you want to make sure you know where everyone is, that you have footage of where everyone is, that kind of thing. And so, as a result, I agree with what Kev says, that proof for someone, so that water bottle, that bottle moving, that was proof for the person who uploaded it. It was possibly proof for other people that saw it. But for myself, I was like, no, because I don't know that there's no one in the room. From looking at that video, I wasn't there. So from looking at that, I don't know who else is in the room with you. I don't know if there's someone off camera creating a draft. I don't know if there just was a natural draft, because that video doesn't portray enough information to me. It just shows a bottle moving, which could be caused by a number of things which aren't ruled out by that footage, which, as a result, it was proof for them but not proof for me. Even though I was respectful about it. And I was like, you know what, it is a cool video that you've got, but that's all it is without the answers to those questions being shown in that video. And that's the tricky thing with video footage. Video, audio, anything. Like, people will be like, oh my god, I've just captured an apparition. And it's like, yeah, but you've not filmed enough. You've not answered enough in that footage of the apparition. It's like when people show photos of, look at this apparition I've caught. And I'm like, yeah, but you've screenshotted or taken a photo and you've zoomed in so much, it's just a blurred figure. I need to see the rest of that area. I need to have clear knowledge of the rest of the area. That apparition, not good enough for me if you've just shown a zoomed in screenshot. Because it could just be pareidolia. And Justin says that his East Drive experience was enough proof for him, and it made him go from this is a scam to this place might be haunted. And he left East Drive after hundreds of hours with something kicking off, knocking and banging in an empty room, which they knew when they knew where everyone was, and they couldn't debunk the experience. 10 others witnessed it, so it was a shared experience and not personal. And outside of the 10 people, outside of those 10 people, you likely wouldn't believe it, as you'd question the proof and how they knew that no one was in the room. And it's never enough for someone outside of that moment, which is kind of what I've said about the video footage. If ever you look at video footage, you've always got questions. You can never answer everything unless you have a particular live stream type thing going. Good example of this, Most Haunted really impressed me in one of their videos last year of the Witch's Cottage, because they did what you should do here. And I will give credit where credit is due, even though they are a kind of dodgy team. Or at least I believe that they're a dodgy team. So what they did, you had Carl holding a camera, you had, I think Stuart was the other cameraman, and a bunch of them were in this room and they could hear knocking coming from the next room. And Carl took his camera and they overlaid the footage. So on the screen, you didn't only have Carl's camera footage, but you also had Stuart. So Stuart was there filming the room that everyone was stood in, and Carl went through and showed the next room to show at the same time that no one was in there, which I thought was very good to have done. And that's the kind of thing you need to do in these situations. So what Justin said about no one was in the room, they needed a camera on all of the people, on like showing, look, here's the whole team, while at the same time you have a camera within that room showing, look, it's capturing all this knocking, banging, stuff moving around, but there's no one in there. These are all things always you think of in hindsight as opposed to in the moment. But this is where people need to try and look from these experiences and improve and just learn from other people's regrets, as it were. And I think that was all I'd say on that stuff. Oh yeah, in terms of him saying this place might be haunted, him going from this is a scam to this place might be haunted, I believe anywhere with human interaction is haunted, or at least is like 99% chance of being haunted. I think the only places where you'd go there and say this isn't haunted are open fields, places which haven't been touched by anyone. They may have ruins there, but they'll be deep, deep underground from the BC era. So that's the only place where I'd go there and be like, that's not haunted. But everywhere else, I'd be like, yeah, it probably is haunted. Again, I wouldn't say this is haunted, but I'd say there's a very high chance. Because I believe there's not haunted, haunted, and then actively haunted. Actively haunted is where you've got ghost stories, and people saying they've heard things, seen things, things have moved, that kind of thing. That's what I would say is actively haunted. And they're the places that investigators go to, because there's like, oh, we want to capture activity, we'll go to the actively haunted places. That isn't to say, I mean, like I say, everywhere I would believe is haunted, just not necessarily actively. So I believe when everyone's like, oh, have you ever been to a place you think's haunted? I was like, yeah. Like, Tesco or whatever. Like, that's probably haunted. Which is funny because I've actually got a friend who works in a Tesco and he says that he believes it is haunted, but like actively haunted. Because I think that he's heard things there when no one else is around. So, yeah, that I just wanted to quickly make that point where I do think if you've got stories of oh, that's good. Apparently, one of my videos trended. But yeah, if you've got stories about the place being haunted, regardless of whether or not you think it means it is actively haunted, because we don't know if the paranormal exists or not. So for me, actively haunted just means there's ghost stories about the place. Haunted means if the paranormal is real, there's probably dead people there. Spirits there. And not haunted just means there's nothing. No houses, no buildings, nothing. I'm getting distracted now because I can hear people. Oh, loud people do. Anyway, moving on. Paul from Ghost on Trent then said that he went from kicking a ball in a car park to being called into a factory by a scared security guard to having a paranormal experience. And that ever since searching for it, and ever since then, he's been searching for it and debunking things. And it makes him think that he was young at the time, and he wonders if what he portrayed in his mind is actually what happened, that he remembered. And so he wants definitive proof, and it's what keeps him searching. Now, that's a good point he makes, that about false memories, that if you're young, that memory has kind of been in your head for a long time, and it will change over time, whether you realise it or not. And so he's had an experience, he remembers it a certain way, but he questions if the way he remembers it is how it happens. And this is why if ever you have a paranormal experience, you need to write it down immediately, or as soon as you can, because the longer you wait to write it down, the more the memory has chance to change. It's like dreams. Dreams are a good example of this, where during the dream it's vivid, you know what's happening. Then you wake up and you remember maybe 90%, but then the more time that passes, the more that dream fades away and you can't remember anything. That's exactly how normal memories work. And your brain, once you start forgetting things, it'll fill in those gaps with things it thinks happened, or things could have logically happened, which might not have happened at all. So, yeah, Paul made a good point with that. Then Joe says that outside of personal experiences, anything he puts out is not evidence. It's at the very best suggestive. And he said that dawn and he heard what sounded like someone walking to them. He never said it was a ghost, but he said that no one was there but them, and they went looking for it, and they don't know what it was. And the issue with what their experience was is that there wasn't enough information for them, as even though they had cameras, the basement and a crawl space were not covered, and so it could have been an animal. And so he views it as interesting and weird, but it's not proof. And people can believe what they want to believe, but he'd be lying if he said it was a ghost. And I agree there that it's like the water bottle thing. I look at that and I go, that's not proof. That's not definitely a ghost. It could be a ghost, but there isn't enough information provided through that video footage in order to look at it and solidly say that is a ghost or that's unexplained. So Joe makes a good point there. Then Beardo said he and Paul had heard high heels and heard a woman saying hello 3 times. They thought it was a person, only later realising that it made no sense to be a person, and so they thought it was interesting. And this is a very good point now that's made by Justin from the Paranormal Monkey podcast, because he says he wonders how much stuff they dismiss when it could have been genuine. And this adds on to the point I was making earlier about the vivid apparitions. And he says that he was at a hotel for an investigator training weekend, and then a couple of people had heard a child crying out, a man telling the child off, and then the man apologising for the child shouting. And they noted it down, but they thought nothing of it. And they later found out that no one else was in the hotel, and there were definitely no children in the hotel. And so he says that something ordinary may not be, but because it's viewed as ordinary, then it's automatically dismissed a lot of the time. And that's very interesting that they heard the child and they heard the parent and whatnot, and they assumed it was real. And it could have been real. Maybe some people just briefly visited the hotel and just walked through, wanting to see what the place was like, as opposed to checking in. But the employees, they said there's no one in the hotel, so that means that there's no one staying in the hotel. Doesn't mean that there was never anyone in the hotel. So that's a sneaky little distinction there. But again, it just shows that if that was an apparition, it was vivid. It was just sound, but it was convincing sound. It wasn't this wispy, echoey, I don't even know how to describe it. The typical ghost sounds, wail, as it were. It was clear. They thought, oh, there's just a normal person. Couldn't see him, but note it down anyway. And then they found out, oh, actually, it could have been a ghost. I think a lot of people have had those interactions. And yeah, so you never know if the person you're speaking to is a ghost or not. It's like there's an experience I have documented on the website from the overnight team, from Corey Scherer, however you say his name. I don't know how you say it. It's awkward. First name's Corey. But he says that he was in a hotel, can't remember the location, but a little girl got into the lift with him. And the lift, I think, stopped. And then, or was bumpy or whatever. And then she said to him that was just, like, not to worry, it was just the kids that were there. And then she kind of creepily said to him that they like him, and then she left. And he, because of that experience, was left wondering if she was a real girl or if she was actually one of the ghosts. So again, it's that thing of questioning, was that person a real person, or were they actually just a manifestation of a spirit? So it's very interesting. It's very interesting. And then Kenny says that it will take an enormous amount of study, and he doesn't accept personal experiences, as he knows how easily people can be fooled. And he's worked with magicians and mentalists, so knows how easily you can be fooled. And so he won't take anything at face value, because there are optical illusions, hallucinations, mental health issues, and for him personally, it will take a lot of study, controlled environments, repeatability, some kind of readings, and you'd have to measure it somehow. And if he experiences it, then that means it's measurable by default. And he knows that people know frequencies and tactile sensations, and they know ranges. And to get data repeatability, you need to get more data, and you need to compare it, and you need to have it analysed. And if an apparition appeared in front of him, the first thing he'd do is poke it to see if he goes through it, if you can touch it, if you can feel it, if it's hot, if it's cold, if it's squishy. He wants to make sure that it isn't an optical illusion. People can create ghosts by projecting images onto smoke and mist, and they can use very tiny screens, like tiny thin screens that are, at a distance you won't see the screens, and it's not as simple as having a personal experience. And I agree with that a lot. It's why I've covered magicians on the database. People like James Randi, Harry Houdini, because they know what they're talking about in regards to optical illusions and how spiritualism movement can fool people, with table tipping and seances, things like that. And what Kenny says is absolutely right because of all of this, and it's good that he's worked with magicians and mentalists to figure out all the tricks that can be used. I mean, I did A-level psychology, and as a result, I know how easily the mind can be fooled, and how weird the mind can be at certain times, regarding memory, and how it experiences things and what it interprets things as, and yeah, with what you were saying about creating ghosts, there's an effect called Pepper's ghost, which I cannot remember the exact details on how you create it. It's quite often used in various attractions, ghost trains, haunted houses, that kind of thing. I believe at Alton Towers, in the Curse at Alton Manor, they use the Pepper's ghost effect a couple of times. But they also use mirrors in there as well to make things appear and disappear. But the way that it works for the Pepper's ghost effect, it's kind of creating a projection or a hologram through the use of mirrors and screens. I can't remember the exact details, but it's something that I'll probably do an article on at some point because it is interesting to know about. But absolutely, you can create ghosts quite easily. I think that when learning physics, my physics teacher created a ghost of a candle through using reflections and mirrors. And so they created this fake candle which looked very real and very vivid, but you could put your hand right through it, which is very interesting. And again, I think that was created through the Pepper's ghost effect, but I don't know for sure. I can only remember them doing that effect. I can't remember them actually what they referred to it as. And again, false memories. Maybe they did refer to it as Pepper's ghost. Because I can imagine them saying it, but I don't know if that happened or not. Anyway, so Beardo then highlights that there are 6 people on the panel discussing the paranormal with different views and experiences, and there are no outbursts of anger, and no one's getting annoyed for someone having a different opinion, and it's why he wanted to do the stream, to kind of show, look, we can all get on and whatnot and discuss sensibly. And Paul said that they can all take stuff from it, and he's learned from Kenny, Joe, and Kev, and he's leaving the conversation a little bit more skeptical. And Kenny says that he has, changing topic a little bit, he says that he's bought tickets to go to events, and within 30 seconds he's received an email asking why he's going to the event, and says he wants to visit it. They say no, and that they don't need him there, and so they refund his money and they won't let him go. And he views that as a reflection on them and as a big red flag. And if you don't know Kenny Biddle, he works for Skeptical Inquiry magazine, I think. I could be wrong with that. I have accurately documented it all in the articles, so if you want to check, then please do. But he is someone that has a good reputation, I would say, for being skeptical, and so these events, they know about him, and if I was running these events, I would invite him to the event, because he goes there, he writes an article or whatever on it, a little bit of something. I would invite him. If I was doing a legitimate event or something like that to do with the paranormal, I'd invite him, because he is someone I would want on side. He is someone who I would want a seal of approval from because of his reputation. It's like Kieran O'Keefe. You'd want him to be loving it as well. You'd want him to be invited and go there and go, you know what, you've done good here. So to say no, we don't need you, refund your money, and that is very much so a big red flag. And that does, it's better having him be there and having him say, I don't know, they might be fake, as opposed to saying, no, we don't need you, because then that's confirming that they're fake. That's how I would view it. The opinion of Kenny is just an opinion, but their actions is a fact. So that's the thing. So this is why I'm like, everyone should always work with debunkers. It goes for paranormal investigation teams. If an investigation team is unwilling to share their footage or their evidence, or is unwilling to show it to debunkers to get a second opinion, they are not legitimate as far as I'm concerned, because it just comes across as they are scared that someone will see through the lies, which it might not be. It might just be a case of they don't want their work torn to shreds or ridiculed or stolen, but that's not going to happen. And it does come across just as, and again, if it's teared to shreds, because there's stuff in there to tear to shreds. Because there's a difference between someone saying, I don't like what you do, and someone saying, I don't like what you do because you have done this, you have done this, you have done this. So, that's why it's all big red flags. And then Justin asks a question saying, to Kenny, saying, do they think you're going to go into conflict with them over things or how they're running their events? And Kenny says that usually he writes up his experience after an event, and he writes it as he sees it, and he tries to be polite and not insulting, and he thinks that they're afraid that he'll write that the place isn't haunted and that he didn't find any ghosts. And he said that's normal, he doesn't ever find any ghosts, but he's still looking. And he got heavily questioned by a local location, and he wanted to know because they wanted to know what he was writing before he published it, and they were going to assign a chaperone to him for the night, and he doesn't get it, and he's confident. If he's confident that stuff's happening, and if they are confident that stuff is happening, then they should be willing to demonstrate it to him. And that's basically what I've just said. And I agree. If they are like, oh, we've got a haunted building, we want to show people, which is why they're doing the event, they'd want Kenny there because they'd be like, oh, Kenny, you're looking for ghosts. Come look at this cool stuff. Now, obviously, there is the risk of him debunking the cool stuff, but like I say, my own belief, just because that instance has been debunked doesn't mean that the place isn't haunted. Now, whether or not you can kick a haunted location into being an actively haunted location, you probably can, but we don't know. And that's probably something worth testing, which is kind of what I've tried with my Ouija boards and things, because this location, which I've done that in, not haunted. Or at least, it's haunted, but it's not actively haunted, going off my own rules. But a lot of people, they just say it's not haunted. So I was like, no, there'll be spirits there. It'll be haunted. So that's why I did the Ouija board stuff, to see if I could kick it from being haunted to being actively haunted, which showed interesting results. But I wouldn't say it's actively haunted yet. Same for getting the dolls, to see if you could bring in objects that are allegedly haunted, and then if that would make a location actively haunted. Again, doesn't seem to be the case. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not the case, it just means that the dolls might be a bit... but, yeah, so Joe then says he's willing to take Kenny with him to places, and that stuff happened to them that they couldn't explain, and so they want to take Kenny in case it happens again, and Kenny may provide an explanation. It offers a different perspective, and that's important. And it's fine with debunking, as that's the truth, and that's what matters to him. Which is all very good points. Then, so that was Joe that said that, and then Justin says that more genuine channels are fully open to education, and learning from others and researching, and... Okay, I'm trying to read what that says now. Yeah, and so he doesn't care who he's talking to when he's doing his podcast, as he's willing to learn, and he doesn't think that fake channels are willing to learn and be educated. He thinks that they're purely in it just for the views and the subscribers, which I think is a good point. I think that, as I think I wrote in the article for this, most haunted have time and time again shown a lack of knowledge and understanding of the paranormal. They throw out little bits and pieces, but it's in one of their videos, Carl zoomed in on a fly, said that it was ominous and negative, but he doesn't know why. But if you know a little bit more about flies and the paranormal, you know that Beelzebub is a demon that is referred to as Lord of the Flies, and that demons in the paranormal are often viewed as kind of bad omens. And so it just shows a lack of knowledge and understanding. Even if that, because I know that demon's a bit of a taboo word at the moment in the paranormal because of how many times people have falsely said it. But for that video, for the context of, oh, look, flies, I think it's fine to say it. So, yeah, because it's paranormal folklore. It is part of paranormal, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. Just means it might be a part that isn't legitimate. Again, keeping an eye on the time, we've got half an hour. So, Paul then says that he doesn't think that they're interested in the paranormal, the fake channels, and it's just about making revenue. And they basically make short films and horror films, which is very true. I do think that's basically what they do. And I'm going to speed up a little bit now because I'm aware that I have been live a little bit longer than I had intended by this point in the thing. So I've gone through, 3 pages? Yeah. So I need to go a little bit quicker. Even the last page isn't too long. So Kenny then says that he's been accused of not being open-minded, and that the definition of being open-minded is to be open to new possibilities and new information, and and that the definition is not to readily accept it, and he doesn't have to accept it just because they say it happened. It's a willingness to consider new information and see if it's valid. If it is, then you incorporate it into your worldview. If not, then you reject it. And he knows enough about Beardo, Kev, and Joe to know that they are open to being wrong, and assumes that Justin and Paul are the same. He doesn't see that from other parts of the paranormal community, and that they are the definition of closed-minded, because they're being stubborn to their experience, and saying that, because they believe their experience is saying that's it, that's the thing. So they're not open to stuff being debunked, etc. Which you need to be open to rational explanations. Now, it's all fine and good saying this is the explanation, and there's a difference between saying no, it's not, it could be, and it is. I think a lot of the time with what I've seen from people debunking, sometimes you do have absolute, yeah, that's what they're saying. But other times I'm like, no, I don't think that's 100%. I think that's a possibility of what's happened here. And sometimes I see that when people are called fake, that the debunk on it is like, oh no, look, they faked it. When really I'm like, no, they may have. There are probably other explanations as well, benefit of the doubt and all that. It's like with the toe tapping, with the knocking. You don't know for sure. It's a possibility. It's a likely possibility, but you don't know for sure unless you see them actually doing it. So I think there are those slight differences there. And Kev says that he's a skeptic in paranormal thought. Yeah, so he's a skeptic, and in the paranormal he's thought of as being a cynic, and always going to start things. What? I don't know what I've written here. Oh yeah, so he's thought of as a cynic, and that he's always going to shout things down and say what it is and be horrible about it. But a skeptic is but he's basically just saying that that's not what he does. And skeptics are seen as fountains of all knowledge, and if they can't explain it, then it's paranormal. And it goes to Kenny, and so he goes to Kenny if he's captured something he's unsure on. And some know more than others about things, which I agree. Some do know more than others. You do need to reach out to others if you're unsure, and you need to try and learn from them. And Kenny says that he's often heard, all right, Mr. Skeptic, how do you explain this? And he says, as a result, he doesn't know and that he needs time to try and explain it. And it's up to the investigator to prove it. If they make a claim, then it's on them to prove that it's true, not on him or a debunker to prove that it's false. Which I agree. I think that debunkers help a lot because they look at it from an independent lens, as it were. An investigator debunking their own work can be problematic because they're invested in it. They look at their work and they're like, oh, I was there, I experienced this, I know what I saw, what I felt, things like that. But if you send it to an external person, a debunker, they can look at it fresh eyes, open mind, and they can be like, no, you've just not seen this angle. This is the particular thing. You're getting too wrapped up in this other stuff that was happening. And, it's looking at the work without that attachment of, oh my God, I've caught a paranormal thing. Because you, as an investigator, you'll probably get excited about it. And so you'll watch your footage back and, you'll watch your footage back and you will be like, oh my God, that's absolutely paranormal evidence. And I've had it before when I caught footage of a cat ball rolling a little bit and lighting up. I was like, oh, this could be paranormal. Now, I didn't say it was 100%. I said it could be. And I had people misinterpreting what I was saying by commenting on it saying, oh no, it's not paranormal, it's just this ball bearing inside it falling. And my response to them was, it could be that, but we can't see the ball bearing fall, therefore we don't know if it was for sure. But it was still brilliant to hear that perspective from those people, because I didn't know about the ball bearing at the time. So I was like, that explains why there's like a I don't know if it is 5 minutes, but a little bit of a period at the start, a settling period, where the ball bearing would probably fall into place, gravity's done its thing, it'll light up, but then it settles. So anything after that point, I then am like, probably paranormal. Or could be paranormal. So that's how I view that. And yeah, so you always need second opinions, always. In any profession, second opinions are always great. And Justin says that academics, such as Kieran O'Keefe, are viewed as dismissible. And Kev says that Kieran is known to stretch in an alternative explanation too, like too far. And skeptics and debunkers both do the same with this, as they're looking for a debunk and an answer can do, looking for a debunk and an answer can do just as much as believers who go to these extents. And academics can be more desperate to protect their reputation, just as a believer can be to protect the paranormal. And to be open-minded is to be educated and recognize something they don't know instead of taking what they know and saying explanation could be bits of, and that the explanation could be bits of things. And this, so this is now where I've said that. In terms of what he's trying to explain there, there's a Sherlock Holmes quote. I can't remember the exact quote, but I've made a note here just to remind me to mention the quote, which is about adjusting. Basically, you always need to adjust your theories to suit the facts and not the facts to suit the theories. And that's kind of what Kev is saying here, where if you are, like with Kieran O'Keefe, with him stretching for explanations, he is twisting the facts a little bit to suit the theory he has of the paranormal is not real, when really you need to adjust your theory to suit the facts. So you need to gather all your data, all your facts, and be like, right, what does this add up to? Or you need to create a theory first, and you need to look at the facts and be like, do they fit with this? And if you're having to tweak the facts and be like, oh, it's a little bit off, but it works, it's not right. And so he goes on to say, a skeptic and both skeptical and debunker science need to be held accountable when they stretch too far, which I agree with. And this is why second opinions are always very helpful, because they can not only look at it from a fresh perspective, but they can keep you in check as well by saying, look, what you've said there, it's cool, almost works, but it's not quite right. And Beardo has said he's seen explanations Kieran has given, and he isn't sure they make sense. Which, yeah, because if you draw that line of, I am skeptical, I do not believe, there are things in the world you can't explain, and whether that be because the paranormal is real, or whether that just be because you don't have enough information, you can't explain it. And so it's better to just to say, I don't know, I don't have enough information, than it is to make things up and make up the information that's lacking. And Kev says that there's lots of pressure on Kieran, as he's known for being a great skeptic. And Kenny then says that both sides need to, if I can read my writing, so both sides need to realise it isn't important to be right all the time. It's important to understand what's going on and say you don't know instead of coming up with a reason. And it's how he's done it. And wait, what? Again, my writing is awful. Sometimes I write these notes at like 2 a.m, and this is probably one of those times where I've stayed up too late. I need to try and take more care in my note taking for these videos. Okay. So he said he's done it himself, and he's made up explanations as he didn't want to be wrong, and so has grown out of that now, and says he just doesn't know. Physics and biology aren't his areas, so he consults the people who specialise in physics and biology. And you should always work together to find the answer. And I agree. I think that everyone in the paranormal community, if one team reaches out to another team, they should be willing to communicate and work together in whatever capacity that may be. Whether that be, I mean, even if that's like sharing evidence. I've had it before where I messaged Bill Slevin, who is involved with the Warren Legacy Foundation, I think it's called. But he worked with people to do with Edinburgh and Warren, and so I said to him, well, can you show me their evidence? Because we were discussing their legitimacy, and he was like, nope, that's in someone else's hands. I can't show you their evidence. And I was like, well, that's convenient. And yeah, so they should publicly release the evidence from those cases and be like, look, it's not made up, it's legitimate, it's real, look at it. And they should not charge for it either. You shouldn't put evidence behind a paywall, because then that's a bit dodgy. Then a question came from Bob Knox, who said, is faking the paranormal for believers really any different to what organised religions have been doing for years? Beardo said, I think so, yeah. Churches and priests 100% believe there is a God, Jesus, etc. Fake paranormal knows there's nothing and will make REM pods go off and wires be pulled. And he's not religious, but he respects people who believe it and likes to think that churches believe it. He's not saying that all churches are good and some bad things have happened in the name of religion, but they're worlds apart. And Joe says that certain pastors do it for money, and it's better, and that's a better way to ask the question than mentioning organised religion. And there are individuals who run big churches who make lots of money on stuff they don't believe in. They claim that they can do miracles through God and cure people on stage. These are people like Pt5, who I've done an article about. And so when they say organised religion, I think Beardo and Joe have kind of interpreted it as Christianity, like the whole umbrella. But I think that the person probably is referring to those. Because this person, I think you can interpret it as this person asking the question is an atheist, and that years ago someone wrote a book that was intended as fictional, people have treated it as fact, and as a result people kind of worshipped this book and turned it into a religion. Therefore you could say it's the same as faking the paranormal, that you have created a video and you've put it out there, and as a result people have this belief because they have seen it, they know it's true. So possibly that is the roots of religion, maybe. We don't know for sure. So that's the only difference to me, that for the faking the paranormal, we can look at the footage and we can determine, yeah, they're faking it. But with organised religion, you can't look at the Bible and say that's fake. Now, granted, if this was many, many, many years ago, we could look at the Bible and say, hang on a minute, that's probably fake. But it's not, like in terms of, it's not that many years, like it's too long ago for us to be able to debunk it. And so you're just left with that question of, is God real? I don't know, can't see him, but people claim miracles exist, and we have this book as our evidence. It's a bit iffy. But in terms of what Joe was saying about certain pastors, they're absolutely, I would say, the same as those who are faking the paranormal, because they are in essence faking religion. The ones who are going on stage saying, through the power of God they've healed people when they haven't, they are faking religion. So they are very much so the same as teams who fake the paranormal. Regardless of, and it's pretty much the same, because you don't know if the paranormal is real, you don't know if religion is real. In terms of God, etc. Obviously religions are real, but you don't know if the principle of a God is real. So then Elaine Curtis asks a question. So she says, why aren't we calling out exorcism and religious involvement? I've listened to a bishop tell people they invited it by not attending mass. It's completely unethical. And so Beardo said scare tactics, and it's why he doesn't get into those conversations. And a bishop has banned Beardo from his demonology class, as he found out he was a debunker, and so he thinks he isn't a real priest. I think, in terms of the priests and exorcisms and whatnot, if you're doing an exorcism and you contact a news company and they're reporting on it and you're making money from it and you're writing a book on it and making a film and all of that, I think you're very clearly not a priest, and that very clearly is not a real exorcism. I think, obviously, I think it's true that you've got to get permission from the Pope, and that he approves very few exorcisms. So I think a lot of the time people might be claiming that they're doing exorcisms when they're not. They might just be doing cleansing rituals, but labelling it as an exorcism. Because exorcisms, from what I know of them, are tiring. They're lengthy processes which are tiring for everyone. And this is why they're not approved often, because it can have an impact not only of the health and the mental health of the person being exorcised, but also of everyone involved, family members, the priests, everyone. So yeah, with those things, I'm just like, I don't think that. I think a lot of the time, these priests who go on about exorcisms, basically, I would not trust a priest that is earning substantial profit, publicity, who's involved in films, books, etc. I would not trust that priest. A priest's aim, to me, should be to help as many people as possible in as easy and as easy and as an accessible a way as possible. Therefore, they need to. I mean, it's fine for them to be on social media, but they need to not charge, and they need to be very communicative. They need to try and help however they can, and they, like I say, not charge. And if they do charge, it'll be basic fees. It'll be like, I need to feed myself, and I need to travel, in terms of getting to the people potentially. And so they'd be like, here's my costs for that. That's it. They wouldn't be like, I want a new TV. I'm going to charge you a ridiculous amount, you know. So they do bare minimum in terms of trying to earn money from it. Like they wouldn't try and earn money. They'd make the essentials. Is basically what I would assume for a priest. Because I don't know how it works with priests and how they get paid and all that. Because I don't know if it's a charity or if it's a proper paid job. I'm not sure. I don't know how it works. Anyway, Kenny watches that particular bishop's videos on TikTok and thinks that it's irresponsible and unethical and that he's a danger to people. And Joe says it's not okay and it's dangerous when saying fake videos are real. So this particular bishop, I think he'd watched certain fake videos and was saying, oh yeah, they've got a demon in their home or whatever, and it is dangerous to be reacting to videos and by saying, I think that's a demon, I think they need to move, and things like that. And Kenny says that when saying it's a demon, if the makers of that video have a belief in that, then they're taking the person's advice and they're going to leave their house, and so it's irresponsible. And Beardo says that, actually we'll leave that because that's a little bit to end it. So Kenny says about it being irresponsible because it'll cause people to leave their house, and I agree. I think if you put out a video and you're genuinely like, I don't know what this is, and someone watches it and says, it's a demon, you're in danger, they're going to leave, they're going to be frightened, they're going to go the rest of their lives probably with mental issues, but also being terrified of demons. And that's just not right and not particularly true. So Beardo says that he'll possibly do streams like this once a month. As far as I'm aware, he hasn't done. I haven't seen anything advertised anyway. It's just been a lot of his gaming streams. And Justin says that he's seen comments as they've been talking, saying how needed the discussion was. And Kenny said it's good to be able to speak freely. And that was then the end of that. That was the end of the stream. Everyone then left. And I agree. It was a very much needed stream. I'm just keeping an eye on the time because I do want to get off, well, kind of now-ish. But yeah, it was a very much so needed stream. And that's why I covered it in 5 articles and a bunch of live streams and things like that. So you can watch this on YouTube and you can find the articles as well online. But yeah, thank you very much everyone for watching. I've seen a couple of people coming in and out through the live stream. Sorry, it wasn't the most cohesive of live streams, but yeah, and also it's a little bit earlier today. I will be live on TikTok tonight at 10 or 11 o'clock, pretty much straight after football finishes. And I will probably be live on TikTok tomorrow night as well, because it's Halloween tomorrow night. And I would quite like to do a special Halloween live stream, so I'll probably do that on TikTok. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed and found it interesting, and I hope that you've understood my rambles. So yeah, so thank you very much.